To remove either of the two available external hard drives if installed in the unit, swing open the access door at the top of the unit for the drive you would like to remove. Slide the drive locking latch down to the unlocked position. Grasp the pull loop for the hard drive bracket and pull the drive bracket out of the unit. To remove a 3.5-inch drive from the drive bracket, remove the 4 silver Phillips No. 2 screws, 2 on each side, that secure the drive to the bracket. Pull the drive out of the bracket. Before installing a drive into the bracket, make sure each side hole of the bracket has a rubber grommet installed. Install a grommet into any hole that is missing a grommet. To replace a 3.5-inch hard drive into the external hard drive bracket, place the drive in the bracket with the spindle side of the drive facing down. Secure the drive to the bracket with the 4 silver Phillips No. 2 screws, 2 on each side of the bracket. Slide the drive bracket into its top external bay with the locking latch aligned to the top of the bay. Slide the locking latch into the top locked position to secure the drive into its bay. Close the access door for the drive bay. To access internal system components, you will need to remove the left side cover. Remove the Phillips No. 2 screw for the rear locking latch of the cover if a screw is installed. Slide the locking latch for the cover to the left unlocked stenciled position. Press down very firmly on the release button at the top rear of the unit until the top of the left side cover releases. Pull the top of the left side cover away slightly from the unit and lift the bottom up to fully disengage the left side cover from the unit. There is a lip along the bottom inside of the left side cover that aligns over a lip on the bottom inside of the PC. There are also 3 tabs on the top inside of the left side cover that slide into slots at the top inside of the PC. To replace the left side cover, carefully align the bottom lip of the cover over the lip on the PC. Swing the top of the cover and press until it snaps into place. Slide the locking latch for the left side cover to the right stenciled locked position. Replace the Phillips No. 2 screw for the locking latch if it was installed at removal. To remove a graphics card from the unit, first remove the left side cover. Detach the power connector, or connectors, from the graphics card. The power connector has a latch that must be squeezed to remove the connector. If the graphics card is a long graphics card with a retention bracket installed, detach the 3 Phillips No. 2 screws that secure the graphics card retaining bracket to the inside wall of the PC. Pull out the graphics card retaining bracket. Detach the 2 Phillips No. 2 screws that secure the graphics card to the chassis. Press down on the latch for the graphics card on the motherboard, and carefully pull the graphics card out of the unit. If installing an additional graphics card into the system, detach the 2 Phillips No. 2 screws for the 2 bottom rear filler panels, and remove the 2 rear filler panels. Reserve the screws for securing the additional graphics card to the unit. To replace a graphics card into the PC, press the connector edge of the graphics card into its motherboard socket until its retaining latch snaps into place. Secure the graphics card to the unit with the 2 Phillips No. 2 retaining screws near the rear edge of the graphics card. If you are installing a long graphics card, place the graphics card retaining bracket back over the front edge of the card. Secure the graphics card retaining bracket to the chassis wall with 3 Phillips No. 2 screws. Replace the graphics card power connector or connectors to the graphics card. To remove any of the internal system hard drives, first remove the left side cover. Detach the SATA power and data cables from the hard drive. If you are removing the hard drive from the bottom drive bay and there is a hard drive installed in the top drive bay, detach the top hard drive SATA data connector from the top drive for access to the bottom drive cables. Squeeze both of the tabs on the internal hard drive placeholder towards the center and slide the hard drive out of the unit. If you are replacing a 3.5-inch internal hard drive, pull out on the sides of the internal hard drive placeholder until the drive can be pulled out of the placeholder. If you are replacing a 2.5-inch SSD internal hard drive, detach the 4 Phillips No. 2 screws securing the 2.5-inch drive to the internal hard drive placeholder. Pull the drive out of the placeholder. To install a 2.5-inch hard drive into the internal hard drive placeholder, align the 4 screw holes on the drive with the 4 screw holes on the bottom of the internal hard drive placeholder. Secure the 2.5-inch hard drive to the placeholder with the 4 Phillips No. 2 screws. When installing a 3.5-inch hard drive, there are 4 attachment pins in rubber grommets on the internal hard drive placeholder that fit into side screw holes on the hard drive. To install a 3.5-inch hard drive, align the side drive holes into one side set of attachment pins. Then pull out on the other side of the drive placeholder until the second set of pins can be inserted into their holes. Make sure the connector edge of the drive is aligned to the tabs end of the internal hard drive placeholder. The internal hard drive placeholder has a small tab on each side that fit over the edge of a cutout inside the internal hard drive bay. To replace the internal hard drive placeholder, slide the placeholder into the bay until the tabs snap into place and the hard drive is secure. Note, the primary internal hard drive should always be installed in the bottom internal hard drive bay. Replace the SATA power and data cables to the internal hard drive. Replace the SATA data connector to the upper hard drive if the connector was detached to access the bottom hard drive connectors. There are 2 thermal sensor cables in the unit, one for each hard drive cage. To replace either thermal sensor cable, first remove the left side cover. It may be easier to remove the cable if you also remove the hard drives in the cage for the sensor. Detach the thermal sensor cable from the motherboard. Squeeze the tabs on the side of the sensor and disengage the sensor from the hard drive cage and remove it from the unit. There are 2 straight tabs and 1 hooked tab on each thermal sensor cable that fit into small cutouts on the hard drive cage. To replace the thermal sensor cable, place the larger straight tab into its cutout, then squeeze the hooked tab while pressing it into place until the thermal sensor is secure on the hard drive cage. Reattach the thermal sensor cable to the motherboard. To remove an M.2 flash memory drive, if installed in the unit, first remove the left side cover and any long graphics cards installed in the unit. Detach the Phillips No. 1 screw securing the M.2 drive to the unit. The board will pop up. Pull the M.2 drive out of its motherboard socket. The M.2 drive has a notch offset from the center that aligns over a key in its motherboard socket. To replace the M.2 drive, angle the drive into its motherboard socket at a 30-degree angle and press down. Hold it down while replacing the Phillips No. 1 screw. To remove a DDR4 DIMM memory module, first remove the left side cover. Press down on the top retaining clip of the memory socket. Angle the top part of the memory module out of its socket and pull the bottom part of the module firmly out of the socket. There is 1 notch on the bottom of every memory module, offset from the center. that fits over a tab in the motherboard memory socket. There is also a notch cut into the side of each memory module that fits over a small tab on the inside edge of the bottom memory retention clip. To replace a memory module in this unit, press the bottom side notch of the memory module over the tab on the bottom clip. Press the top part of the memory module firmly into the socket until the top retaining clip snaps into place at the top side of the module. To remove the rear system fan from an air-cooled unit, first remove the left side cover. Detach the fan connector from the motherboard. Detach the 4 Phillips No. 2 screws that secure the fan to the rear of the unit. Keep your hand on the fan as you remove the last screw to keep it from falling on internal system components, and remove the fan from the unit. To replace the system fan in an air-cooled unit, align the connector edge of the fan towards the top of the unit. Secure the rear system fan to the unit with its 4 Phillips No. 2 screws. Replace the rear system fan connector to the motherboard. To access the optical drive or cable management, you will need to remove the right side cover. To remove the right side cover, detach the 2 Phillips No. 2 screws that secure the cover to the rear of the PC. Slide the right side cover toward the rear of the unit, then lift it away from the PC. There is a lip along the bottom inside of the right side cover that aligns over a lip on the bottom inside of the PC. There are also tabs on the top and front inside edges of the right side cover that slide into slots and under a lip on the PC. To replace the right side cover, carefully align the bottom lip of the cover over the lip on the PC and the 2 top tabs into their slots. Slide the right side cover forward until the front tabs slide under their lip and the front of the cover is flush against the front bezel of the chassis. Secure the right side cover to the rear of the PC with its 2 Phillips No. 2 screws. To remove the optical drive, first remove the right side cover. Flip open the optical drive door on the front cover. Detach the SATA power and data cables from the rear of the drive. Press on the black plastic drive latch at the top rear of the drive and push the optical drive out the front of the unit. If you are replacing the optical drive, remove the black plastic latch on the drive. To remove the latch, pry the latch off the side of the drive. Reserve the latch. To install a new optical drive into the unit, first install the reserved plastic latch on the new drive. The plastic latch has 3 small alignment pins that fit into 3 small holes on the optical drive. To install the latch, press the pins into the holes until the latch is secure. There is a small edge on the optical drive latch that fits over a small metal edge on the right side of the PC. To replace the optical drive into the unit, align the drive into its bay with the latch on the top side of the drive. Slide the drive into its bay from the front of the unit until the latch snaps into place. Reattach the SATA power and data cables to the rear of the optical drive. Close the optical drive door on the front cover. To remove the power supply, first remove the left side cover and the right side cover. Detach the 2 power supply connectors from the top corner of the motherboard. Detach the large power supply connector from the center of the motherboard. Detach the power connector or connectors from all internal hard drives. In units with an upper internal hard drive cage, Pull the upper hard drive power connectors out of the cable guides on the bottom of the upper cage. In units with an upper external hard drive bay, detach the power supply junction cables to the external hard drive power cables. Detach the power connector or connectors from the graphics card or cards installed in the unit. Remove the graphics card power cables from the cable guide on the top of the bottom internal hard drive cage. Snip the zip tie securing the graphics card power cables to the side of the bottom internal drive cage. Detach the hard drive SATA data cables from the motherboard that connect near the large motherboard power supply connector to allow the large power supply cable to be pulled to the right side of the unit. Detach the optical drive power connector from the optical drive on the right side of the unit. Pull the top motherboard power supply cables to the right side of the unit through their cable access hole. Detach the optical drive data connector from the optical drive if an optical drive is installed for access to the large power supply connector. Detach the large red USB connector from the motherboard to make room if there is a long graphics card installed. Pull the large motherboard power supply connector to the right side of the unit through the central cable access hole. Pull the upper hard drive bay power cables to the right side of the unit through the central access hole. Pull the bottom internal hard drive power cables to the right side of the unit through their bottom access hole. Pull the top motherboard power supply cables out of their cable guides on the right side of the unit that lead to the bottom of the unit. Pull the optical drive and upper hard drive power connectors out of their cable guides on the right side. Be careful of the top I/O connectors that share the same cable guides. Pull the large motherboard power cable out of its cable guide at the bottom right side of the unit. Detach the 4 Phillips No. 2 screws that secure the power supply to the rear of the unit. Slide the power supply slightly into the unit, then pull the power supply out, carefully feeding the power supply connectors through the bottom access hole from the right side to the left inside part of the unit to fully remove the power supply. There are guides on the inside chassis wall to assist in the correct placement of the power supply. To replace the power supply, first feed the power supply connectors from the left side to the right side of the unit through their bottom access hole. Align the power supply within its guides, then slide the power supply to the rear of the unit. Secure the power supply to the rear of the unit with its 4 Phillips No. 2 screws. Replace the large motherboard power supply connector into its large cable guide at the bottom right side of the unit. Replace the optical drive and upper hard drive power connectors into their cable guides. Replace the top motherboard power cables into their guides, leading to the top of the unit. Feed the bottom internal hard drive power connectors back to the main cavity of the unit through their bottom access hole. Feed the upper hard drive power connectors back to the main cavity of the unit through the central access hole. Feed the large central motherboard power supply connector back to the main cavity through the central access hole. Replace the red USB connector to the motherboard if it was detached to make room for the motherboard connector. Replace the optical drive data connector if it was detached from the optical drive. Feed the top motherboard power supply connectors back to the main cavity of the unit through their access hole. Replace the power connector to the optical drive if an optical drive is installed in the unit. Replace the hard drive SATA connectors to the motherboard near the large power connector header. Secure the graphics card power cables to the side of the bottom internal hard drive cage with a zip tie. Place the graphics card power cables into the cable guide at the top of the bottom internal hard drive cage. Reconnect the graphics card cables to the graphics card or cards. If the unit has an upper external hard drive cage, reconnect the power junction cables to the external hard drive power cables. If the unit has an upper internal hard drive cage, place the upper hard drive power cables into the cable guides on the upper hard drive cage. Replace all connectors to all internal hard drives. Replace the large power supply connector to the motherboard. Replace the two smaller motherboard power supply connectors at the top edge of the motherboard. To remove or replace the top cover for the top hard drive bay area, or the front I/O board, first remove the left side cover and the right side cover. Remove any external hard drives or hard drive trays if the unit has bays for upper external hard drives. Detach the connectors from the front I/O board on the right side of the unit. Detach the 5 Phillips No. 2 screws that secure the front I/O board and external hard drive top cover assembly to the unit, 2 on the right side and 3 on the left side. Note, these screws have a larger flathead than other chassis screws used in the unit. Pull the top hard drive area top cover assembly out of the PC. If you are replacing the external hard drive top cover, or non-external hard drive area top cover, or the front I/O board, remove the 4 Phillips No. 1 screws that secure the front I/O board assembly to the cover. Remove the front I/O board assembly from the cover. If you are replacing the front I/O board, remove the 3 Phillips No. 1 screws that secure the front I/O board to its bracket. Note, you will need a slender-barreled screwdriver to access one of the screws. Pull the front I/O board off of its bracket. To install a new front I/O board, align the ports of the I/O board into their cutouts on its bracket, aligning the screw holes on the board over their standoffs on the bracket. Secure the front I/O board to the bracket with 3 Phillips No. 1 screws. Place the front I/O assembly back onto the cover until the 4 screw holes align. Replace the 4 Phillips No. 1 screws to secure the front I/O assembly to the top cover. There are 3 tabs on the right side of the top hard drive area top cover that fit into 3 slots on the chassis. To replace the front I/O and top hard drive area top cover assembly, press the tabs of the cover into their slots and press the cover onto the unit until correctly seated. Replace the 5 Phillips No. 2 screws to secure the front I/O and top hard drive area top cover assembly to the chassis. Replace the connectors to the front I/O board. To remove the top side bezel, first remove the left side cover, the right side cover, any external hard drives or hard drive trays, the top hard drive area top cover and front I/O assembly, and the top cover assembly. To remove the top side bezel, press the release tab for the top side bezel on the top cover while sliding the top side bezel toward the rear of the top cover to remove the top side bezel. There are several tabs on the top side bezel. That fit into slots on the top cover. To replace the top side bezel, align the tabs over their slots and slide the bezel forward until secure on the top cover. To remove the top cover, first remove the left side cover, the right side cover, any external hard drives or hard drive trays, and the top hard drive area top cover and front I/O assembly. Disconnect the power button cable from the motherboard. Detach the Phillips No. 2 screw that secures the key mod placeholder to the top cover. Pull off the key mod placeholder. Detach the 2 Phillips No. 1 screws at the top of the top cover where the placeholder was located. Slide the small underside plastic piece at the front of the top side cover out from under the top chassis metal and remove it from the unit. Detach the Phillips No. 2 screw on the top inside of the unit that secures the top cover to the top of the unit. Note that you may need to remove the top graphics card to access the screw, depending on the length of your screwdriver. Slide the top cover assembly towards the rear of the unit and lift the cover off of the unit. You may need to pry up on the front edge of the bezel to fully disengage it from the top chassis metal. If you are replacing the top cover or the power button and LED cable, remove the top side bezel and reserve. Remove the cable from the top cover. To do so, first pull out on the LED holder and pull the LED out from its holder. Pull out on the small tab that holds the power button to the cover. And pull the button up and out of its holder before pulling it back down towards the bottom of the cover to fully remove the cable from the top cover. To install a new top cover, or power button and LED cable, feed the power button part of the cable up to the top of the top cover from the bottom. Snap the power button into its holder. Press the power button LED into its holder. Install the reserved top side bezel onto the top cover. There are several hooks on the bottom of the top cover. That slide into slots at the top of the chassis. There are also 2 hooks on the front edge that slide into slots at the top of the chassis. To replace the top cover assembly, first feed the power button connector in through its top access hole to the main chassis cavity. Align the hooks on the top cover over their slots and slide forward until the top cover is correctly seated. Replace the Phillips No. 2 screw on the top inside wall of the chassis to secure the top cover to the chassis. Replace the top graphics card if it was removed for access to the screw. Slide the small plastic bottom piece of the top cover under the top chassis metal at the front of the top cover until its screw holes align with the chassis metal. secure the plastic piece to the top of the unit with its 2 Phillips number 1 screws. There are 2 tabs on the key mod placeholder that fit into 2 slots on the top chassis metal near the front of the top cover. Place the tabs into the slots to correctly align the placeholder onto the unit. Secure the placeholder to the unit with its Phillips number 2 screw. Replace the power button connector to the motherboard. To remove either wireless LAN antenna, first remove the left side cover, the right side cover, any external hard drives or hard drive trays, any graphics cards installed in the unit, the top hard drive area top cover and front I/O assembly, and the top cover assembly. Detach the wireless LAN antennas from the wireless LAN board. Pull the antennas out from the plastic cable guide on the motherboard. Feed the antennas through their access hole towards the right side of the unit. Free the antennas from the cable guides running from the bottom to the top of the right side of the unit. Feed the antennas back into the main cavity of the unit through their small access hole at the top right side of the unit. Free the antennas from the cable guides on the top inside of the unit. And remove any tape securing the cables to the top inside of the unit. Pull the antenna cable for the antenna you wish to remove up through its access hole. If removing the front, number 1, antenna, detach the 2 Phillips number 1 screws that secure the antenna to the top of the unit. Pull the antenna off of the top of the unit. If removing the rear, number 2, antenna, pry the antenna off the top of the unit. To replace the rear, number 2, antenna, place the antenna adhesive side down onto its stenciled location on the top of the chassis. To replace the front, number 1, antenna, place the antenna onto its location at the top of the unit and secure with its 2 Phillips number 1 screws. Feed the antenna cable back down into the unit through its access hole. Secure the antennas into the cable guides on the top inside of the unit, replacing any tape securing them to the top inside of the unit. Feed the antenna cables back to the right side of the unit through the small access hole near the top of the unit. Secure the antenna cables into their cable guides running from the top to the bottom of the right side of the unit. Feed the antennas back to the main cavity of the unit through their access hole at the bottom of the unit. Place the antennas into their plastic cable guide on the motherboard. Reattach the wireless LAN antenna connectors to the wireless LAN board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the board. To remove the wireless LAN board, first remove the left side cover and all graphics cards installed in the unit. Carefully snap off the antenna connectors from the board. Detach the Phillips number 1 screw securing the board in place. The board will pop up from the socket. Pull the board out of its socket on the motherboard. The wireless LAN board has a notch near the side edge that aligns over a key in its motherboard socket. To replace the wireless LAN board, angle the board into its motherboard socket at a 30-degree angle and press down. Replace the Phillips number 1 screw to secure the wireless LAN board to the motherboard. Reattach the wireless LAN antenna connectors to the wireless LAN board. The antenna connectors are labeled 1 and 2 and should be connected to the corresponding 1 and 2 labeled ports on the board. To replace either of the chassis feet, first remove the left side cover, the right side cover, and the power supply. Squeeze on the hooks securing the chassis foot to the bottom of the unit from the inside of the unit until the chassis foot can be removed from the bottom of the unit. Pull off the bottom chassis rubber from the chassis foot and reserve. There are hooked tabs on each chassis foot that align into slots on the bottom of the chassis. To replace a chassis foot, first press the reserved bottom rubber onto the chassis foot. Press the tabs of the foot into their slots until the chassis foot is secure. To replace any piece of chassis foot rubber, first lay the unit on its side. Pry off the piece of chassis foot rubber from the chassis foot. To install a new piece of chassis foot rubber, press the new rubber adhesive against the bottom of the chassis foot. To remove or replace the front cover, first remove the left side cover and the right side cover. Remove any external hard drives or hard drive trays if the unit has bays for upper external hard drives. Remove the top hard drive area top cover and front I/O assembly. Remove the bottom graphics card if there is a long graphics card installed in the bottom graphics card slot. Detach the front lighting connectors from the motherboard. There are V-shaped lighting connectors near the bottom of the motherboard and the Voodoo light connector near the top front edge. Remove the V-shaped lighting connectors from the cable guide on the top of the internal hard drive cage and the cable guide on the front inside chassis wall. Remove the Voodoo lighting cables from the cable guides near the upper hard drive cage and at the front inside of the unit. Press on the center latch for the front cover from the inside of the unit and pull out on the plastic tabs on either side of the front cover to release the cover. Carefully pull the front cover off of the unit, pulling the front lighting connectors out through their access hole at the front of the unit. If you are replacing the front cover itself, remove the V-shaped lighting from the front cover and reserve. When installing a new front cover, install the reserved V-shaped lighting cover into the new front cover. The 3 tabs on each side of the front cover fit over indented edges on the chassis. To replace the front cover, first feed the lighting connectors carefully into the unit through their access hole. Align the front cover tabs over their edges and press the front cover until it is securely in place. Route the Voodoo lighting cables into the cable guides at the front inside of the chassis and near the upper hard drive cage. Route the V-shaped lighting connectors into the cable guide at the front of the chassis and into the cable guide on the top internal hard drives cage. Reconnect all lighting connectors to the motherboard. Each connector is labeled to match the motherboard stencil for the connector to ensure correct replacement of the cables. To remove or replace the V-shaped lighting front cover, first remove the left side cover, the right side cover, any external hard drives, or hard drive trays if the unit has bays for upper external hard drives, the top hard drive area top cover and front I/O assembly, the bottom graphics card if a long bottom graphics card is installed in the unit, and the front cover. Detach the 2 Phillips number 1 screws that secure the V-shaped lighting cover to the front cover. Press on the 2 tabs above the V-shaped lighting cover on the inside of the front cover, while pressing the V-shaped lighting cover up until the V-shaped lighting cover disengages from the front cover. Pull the V-shaped lighting cover completely off of the front cover. There is a small slot on the bottom of the V-shaped lighting cover that slides over a small tab on the front cover. There are also 2 small tabs at the top of the V-shaped lighting cover that fit into slots on the front cover. To replace the V-shaped lighting cover, slide the slot over its tab and press the V-shaped lighting cover tabs into their slots until the cover correctly seats on the front cover. Secure the V-shaped lighting cover to the front cover with its 2 Phillips number 1 screws. To remove the front system fan, first remove the left side cover, the right side cover, any external hard drives or hard drive trays, the top hard drive area top cover and front I/O assembly, the bottom graphics card if a long bottom graphics card is installed in the unit, and the front cover. Detach the front system fan connector from the motherboard. Remove the connector from the cable guides on the top of the bottom internal hard drive cage and the front inside of the unit. Detach the 4 Phillips number 2 screws that secure the front system fan to the front of the chassis. Keep your hand on the fan as you remove the last screw and pull the front system fan out from inside the unit. To replace the front system fan, align the fan back into the unit with the connector on the fan aligned to the top of the fan. Secure the fan to the front of the unit with its 4 Phillips number 2 screws. Replace the fan connector into the cable guides at the front inside of the chassis and on top of the bottom internal hard drive cage. Replace the front system fan connector to the motherboard. To remove a thermal module from an air-cooled unit, first remove the left side cover. Detach the thermal module connector to the motherboard. Loosen the 4 captive Torx 15 screws that secure the thermal module to the motherboard. Pull the thermal module out of the unit. Before replacing the thermal module into the unit, first clean off the thermal grease from the CPU. If you are replacing the same thermal module into the unit, clean the thermal grease from the thermal module as well. To install an air cooling thermal module into the PC, first apply thermal grease or a thermal pad to the CPU. Align the thermal module carefully over the CPU with the stencil of directional airflow on the air cooler pointing toward the top of the unit. Tighten the 4 Torx 15 screws to secure the thermal module in the unit. Replace the thermal module connector to the motherboard. To remove the thermal module from a water-cooled unit, first remove the left side cover. Detach the CPU fan and pump connectors from the motherboard. Detach the 4 Phillips number 2 screws that secure the thermal module fan to the rear of the unit. Loosen the 4 captured Phillips number 2 screws that secure the pump over the CPU in the order indicated by the stencils on the pump. Carefully pull the thermal module out of the PC. Before replacing the thermal module into the unit, first clean off the thermal grease from the CPU. If you are replacing the same thermal module into the unit, clean the thermal grease from the thermal module as well. To install a water cooling thermal module back into the unit, first apply thermal grease or a thermal pad to the CPU. Carefully position the thermal module over the CPU. The pump hoses should be aligned to the bottom of the unit. Tighten the 4 Phillips number 2 screws in the order indicated by the stencils on the pump to secure the pump over the CPU. Secure the fan to the rear of the unit with its 4 Phillips number 2 screws. Reattach the CPU fan and pump connectors to the motherboard. To remove the CPU from a unit with an AMD CPU installed, first remove the left side cover and the air or water-cooled thermal module. Next, swing up the load lever from the CPU socket and pull it back. Carefully pull the microprocessor off the motherboard. To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow triangle on the corner of the chip assembly. Identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Align the assembly to pin 1 on the motherboard socket when replacing the CPU into its socket. Swing the load lever down after installing the CPU to lock it into place. To remove the CPU from a unit with an Intel CPU installed, first remove the left side cover and the liquid or air-cooled thermal module, depending on which is installed in the unit. Press down to release the CPU load lever from its retention tab, and pull the load lever and load plate away from the socket. Identify pin 1 on the socket by the mark on the corner of the socket stencil. Line up the pin 1 corner of the Intel CPU removal replacement tool over the socket. Press down on the plunger of the removal tool to pick up the CPU from the socket and remove the tool and the CPU from the motherboard. To replace the CPU, first identify pin 1 position on the microprocessor by noting the yellow mark on the corner of the chip assembly. Make sure the Intel CPU staging tool side pins are set to the correct socket type for the CPU. For this unit, it is LGA1151. Place the CPU into the Intel CPU staging tool. When correctly inserted, the small notches on the side of the CPU should align over the side pins on the staging tool. Place the removal replacement tool over the stage, lining up the pin 1 triangles on each tool. Press down on the removal replacement tool to pick the CPU up from the stage. Align the removal replacement tool again to pin 1 on the motherboard CPU socket. Press the plunger on the removal replacement tool to release the CPU into the socket. Swing the load plate down. Lock the load lever under its retaining tab to secure the microprocessor into place. CMOS factory settings should be restored as a first step before replacing the system motherboard. To restore CMOS factory settings, first remove the left side cover. Remove the battery from the motherboard. Note, the location of the battery and method of removal will vary depending on the motherboard installed in the unit. Wait 30 seconds. Replace the battery to the motherboard. CMOS factory settings are now reset. Note that you will now need to enter System BIOS and reset the clock in BIOS after this procedure. To remove the motherboard, first remove the left side cover, any graphics cards installed in the unit, system memory, the wireless LAN board, the M.2 flash memory drive if installed in the unit, the liquid-cooled or air-cooled thermal module, and the CPU. If removing an Intel CPU, install a socket cover on the load plate window before replacing the load plate over the socket. Remove all connectors from the motherboard. Make sure to disengage the wireless LAN antennas from their cable guides on the motherboard and clear them from the edge of the motherboard. Detach the 8 Phillips No. 2 screws that secure the motherboard to the inside chassis wall. Carefully tip up the inside edge of the motherboard and remove the motherboard from the unit. Place the motherboard in an anti-static bag. To install a motherboard, tip the rear I/O connectors of the motherboard into their cutouts on the rear of the unit, and align the motherboard into place, clearing the connectors out from under the sides of the motherboard. Secure the motherboard to the inside chassis wall with its 8 Phillips number 2 screws. Replace all connectors to the motherboard. Note that each connector is labeled to assist in replacement to the correct port. Make sure the wireless LAN antenna cables are routed into their cable guides on the bottom edge of the motherboard.